Today is part 3 of ranking every NBA MVP, from Bob Pettit to Joel Embiid, based on how their career has played out. We already ranked the bottom half of this list, so go ahead and check out my most recent uploads, and don't forget to subscribe for part 4 of this series. Now let's get started. At number 18, I have Dirk Nowitzki. Normally when you're given a tag for the type of player you are, you don't lose that for your entire career. For example, Dirk Nowitzki was labeled a playoff choker for the first 10 years of his career. All the signs were pointing towards Dirk taking the crown as the best player in the world in 2006, and he actually silenced the critics by leading the Mavericks to the NBA Finals that same season. But during the series, we saw Dirk collapse, putting up a 23-11 on 39% from the field and 25% shooting from 3. The following year, Dirk won his MVP, averaging a 25-9-3 on the best team in the West, but then lost to the 8th seed we'd believe Warriors. He didn't make it past the second round of the playoffs until 2011, and in 2011, Dirk changed the narrative. In the first round, he dismantled the Blazers, led by LaMarcus Aldridge. In the second round, he swept the Kobe-led Lakers. In the Western Conference Finals, he defeated KD and the Russ-led Thunder. And as we all know, Dirk won the NBA Finals by beating the Big Three Heat. Just like that, the narrative of Dirk can't get it done in the playoffs was over, and now we often regard Nowitzki's 2011 playoff run as one of the greatest ever. As for his career as a whole, Nowitzki was a lethal shooter and a great leader, bringing a franchise with no previous success to heights never seen before. At number 17, I have Karl Malone. Speaking of playoff chokers, Malone might be the most prolific of them all. For his career, Malone shot 51% from the field. He only eclipsed the 51% field goal percentage mark in 4 playoff series in his entire career. In a 19-year career, only 4 times was he above his regular season field goal percentage. However, in the regular season, Malone was the epitome of consistency. You could look at any season from 1987 to 2000, and it would be the exact same. He'd be running the pick and roll with John Stockton, and that worked in the regular season, but clearly not in the playoffs. Malone is a 2-time MVP, though he truly didn't deserve the 1997 MVP over Jordan, and his second MVP was during a lockout season where there was no clear top guy in the NBA. While I don't mess with Karl Malone, and you probably don't either, I have to respect his level of consistency and dominance. He averaged over 20 points a game from his second season in the league to his second to last season in the league. He was the best guy on 2 teams that made the NBA Finals and played 82 games in a season 10 times in his career. We likely will never see someone as durable as a mailman, but we also probably won't see someone as terrible in the big moment as Malone was. At number 16, I have Julius Erving. While there are many reasons why Dr. J could be lower on this list, like the fact that Erving didn't have a reliable jumper, was a subpar defender, and ultimately choked in the playoffs during the height of his career, what makes Erving so special is his revolutionary style of basketball. He inspired David Thompson, who inspired Michael Jordan, who inspired Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, who have inspired a new generation of hoopers. He turned a game that was clear-cut and straightforward and added new strokes of expression, which ultimately changed the way we play basketball. Unfortunately for Erving, his prime years were in the ABA, where there's not much footage of him, but when he entered the NBA in 1976, he was an incredible talent and the first player to lead the Sixers to success since Wilt Chamberlain. Erving ultimately won his first and only NBA MVP in 1981, and yes, you could argue that Bird deserved it, but I don't see a problem with a guy averaging a 25, 8, and 4 on one of the best teams in basketball being the most valuable player. Erving did have some gaping holes in his game, but what I recognize is that Erving is one of the most influential players ever, and his style of play has inspired millions to pick up a basketball. At number 15, I have Oscar Robertson. Robertson was the league's most talented guard until Jordan came along. There wasn't anything he couldn't do on the court, as evidenced by his infamous 1962 season where he averaged a triple-double, something that wasn't done again until Russell Westbrook in 2017. From the moment he entered the league, you knew that Oscar was going to be something special, and statistically he was. But if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I value a lot more than statistics, and Robertson didn't have much success outside of individual success. In the prime years of his career on the Royals, he only made it past the first round twice, even with all-stars like Jerry Lucas and Jack Twyman on his team. It wasn't until Robertson was 32 and a shell of himself on the Bucks that he won an NBA Finals. The one thing that Robertson had was individual greatness, but you have to wonder where Robertson would be if he had pieced it all together during the prime of his career. At number 14, I have Moses Malone. The career of Moses Malone is an interesting one for a couple of reasons. One, he was on 7 different teams during his career, the most out of anybody on this list. 2, he truly dominated the late 70s and early 80s, and nobody seems to bring that up in all-time ranking discussions. Moses was a 3-time MVP. Yeah, you heard that right. Moses Malone has more MVPs than Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal. And you may be wondering how that happened. Well, for starters, Moses Malone is one of the greatest rebounders in the history of the NBA despite being an undersized center. But the one thing about Moses is that he never gave up. Moses had an 8-year stretch where he averaged over 13 rebounds a game, and during that time, his points per game sat anywhere from 24 to 31 a night. During his 4-year transcendent prime, Moses won all 3 of his MVPs, a Finals MVP, had multiple All-Defensive appearances, and was often regarded as the best player in the NBA. But why isn't Moses higher on this list? Well, for one, his transcendent prime was really only 4 years. After that, he fell off a cliff, even though he played 12 more seasons in the NBA. And most importantly, he was traded 4 times from ages 21 to 33. It's rare to see a former MVP traded once, unless of course they demand a trade. But for one to get traded 4 separate times has to mean something in the grand scheme of things. I must say it's interesting that we often disregard his achievements compared to other greats before his time. I say we start appreciating Moses and his overall ability to impact the game. At number 13, I have Kevin Durant. Durant is one of the more interesting players on this list, because while we all recognize his talent, it feels as though in terms of accolades, he's underachieved. For more than 5 years, we recognize KD as the second best player in the league, and for over 12 years, he's been a consensus top 10 player. He's one of the greatest scorers I've ever seen and has the ability to attack the defense in ways never seen before. But despite that, he only won 1 MVP in his career, and he only won 2 NBA Finals, both with the Golden State Warriors, who many regard to be the greatest team ever assembled. Since leaving the Warriors in 2019, KD has only played 127 games in 4 seasons. And while he's still a top 10 player in my eyes and a top 15 player of all time, it blows my mind that there was no point in time where he was the best player in the league, much less the best player on a championship team, something none of the players above him can say. At number 12, I have Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq is one of the greatest big men ever. His ability to dominate the game was only matched by Wilt Chamberlain. There was no way to stop him. You could only attempt to contain him, and even then, he'd still drop 35 on your head. He was the definitive best player on 3 straight title teams, and for a while there, looked like he would be a top 5 player of all time. So why is he ranked so low? The problem with Shaq was always effort. After winning his first titles in LA, he stopped caring. He showed up to the regular season out of shape and truly never took basketball seriously. I always think of Shaq's career like this: dominant, but not the best. Shaq had one of the greatest 3-year playoff stretches in NBA history, but also lost to Hakeem and the 2004 Pistons in his prime. He was so dominant that no individual player could stop him, but he was also a liability in the last 5 minutes of a close playoff game because he couldn't shoot free throws. I'm not here to take a crap on Shaq and his greatness. I'm here to tell you that while Shaq's numbers and individual dominance was great, he's not one of the greatest basketball players ever because he never put basketball first. At number 11, I have Hakeem Olajuwon. While you could arguably switch Shaq and Hakeem, I give the edge to Hakeem because he's a significantly better defender, and as I mentioned before, he swept Shaq in the finals. While we hear about how great of a defender Hakeem was, I think we should focus more on his offense. Hakeem's Dream Shake is one of the most unstoppable moves in basketball history, up there with Kareem's Skyhook. He averaged over 20 points a game from his rookie season to his age 34 season. He had a respectable mid-range jumper and was an underrated playmaker. He was a leader and number 1 option on 3 finals teams and 2 NBA champions. But the reason why he doesn't crack the top 10 is that besides his 3 finals runs, he didn't have much playoff success. From 1988 to 1993, in 6 different seasons from Hakeem's age 25 to 31 seasons, he didn't make it out of the first round. But despite his early playoff woes, Hakeem still came up clutch in the big moments and finished his career with 2 titles and 2 finals MVPs. That was part 3 of ranking every NBA MVP based on how their careers played out. Subscribe and like this video for part 4.